And hello again, everybody. This is David Oldham with Constitutional Grounds reporting for 3D Politics in the 3D Politics and Constitutional Grounds COVID chase car. This week we are not sponsored by the Italian and Asian Restaurant Association. This week it's the Restaurant and Importers Associations just in general, because this week everybody seems to be affected, most places here in Oklahoma. We also have a complimentary sponsorship from the Affected Workers of America, and this would be just about everybody who has lost work due to their just being ordered not to come to work for whatever reason. But let's get into it. We're here talking about some of the issues that are affecting all of us, and I've been out chasing around looking for signs of liberty, signs of the actual virus. I have yet to meet anybody with the virus, and so we'll see what transpires. But the one thing that I have noticed is, as George W. Bush sacrificed the free market to save or abandon free market principles to save the free market, as oxymoronic as that was, well, just plain moronic. So it seems that the United States has abandoned liberty to save liberty? Save what we have? I don't know, because that's exactly what seems to be going on. Just the other day, on Sunday, we had several churches. Generally, they are the faith, the word faith kind of churches, the real, just depend on your faith kind of churches, who held church services despite orders by government officials not to do so. In Florida and Louisiana, there were quite prominent church services held, and these services have led to an arrest in Florida. No arrests were made in Louisiana, where a church in Baton Rouge held services and had maybe as many as 5,000 people go through the church or something. I'm trying to remember the numbers, but they had a lot of numbers. And then there was another church in Central, which may be the same church. It was a little confusing as I was reading, and I wanted to get online and get this done, so I didn't follow up all the way. But Pastor Tony Law down there in Louisiana, he has held church services and had people in. Other churches have held services where you could drive up, and they did the old who was the guy from Orange County, California, that started his church in a drive-in. You could come up and you drive your car in and hook up just like you would in a drive-in, and it's now the Crystal Cathedral. Anyway, Robert Fuller. They did that kind of a thing. They didn't have the advantage of the drive-in speakers, but they did broadcast out in the parking lot loud enough that you could drive in, open up your windows, and basically hear the service. But in Florida, Rodney Howard Brown, the Holy Ghost bartender and the leader of the Church of Holy Laughter, has been arrested. And he has been charged with unlawful assembly and violating quarantine orders. Now, there's a problem. Oh, and local officials took to the lectern in a press conference and said that creating a dangerous environment for members of the church and their community. And so that's why they were bringing all this. They also condemned him for forcing them to do their job, and so forth. So this whole thing has gone down. Rodney Howard Brown bailed out, $500 bail. It's 2 second-degree misdemeanor accounts, so it's pretty minimal. We'll see how far this goes. He's got the money. He's got support from a religious legal organization who looks at these, takes on these kinds of cases. So I'm hopeful that this will actually lead to some place that in court, that somebody will follow this out and maybe even take a misdemeanor count like this all the way to the Supreme Court, so that we could get some resolution. Here's the problem. Just Google, or whatever search engine you use, because I don't use Google very much anymore, but Google CDC isolation quarantine, and note the definitions of those 2 words, isolation and quarantine. Now, the CDC defines the isolation as removing someone who has a particular disease from all others. So you have the disease, and you are now being removed from all others. So you are isolated from all others. That is isolation. Quarantine, on the other hand, is the removal or the quarantining of someone who has been infected but doesn't necessarily show symptoms. So look at their definitions. What we have with all these supposed lawful orders around the country is forced quarantine of people we don't even know have been exposed. I said infected, I really mean exposed, to a particular pathogen. And so in this case, COVID. So the problem is, we have supposedly lawful orders based on hysterics with no basis in law. In fact, Rodney Howard Brown was accused of violating quarantine rules or orders or rules, and they are county rules that have been set up, have actually not been passed by law, but could not, because these rules violate your Fifth Amendment rights. Fifth Amendment says in relevant part that no person should be deprived of liberty without due process of law. So, you haven't even been exposed, or you don't know that you've been exposed, but you are being forced to not gather. So your right of assembly is gone, just on the off chance that we might be slowing things up, not even preventing, but slowing things up, for the transmission and the exposure rate. So it's all theory. There is nothing in this that is anything but theory. So that's what's going on this week with COVID. Our liberty has been abandoned by governments at the federal, state, and local levels. We now have the federal government issuing some sort of closure orders. There's some executive order or something saying that we're going to, and I don't know if it's just the government or it's all sorts of people. I haven't been able to figure all that out yet. Haven't looked into it too much, quite frankly. But federal, state, and local governments, counties and municipalities, are issuing these orders. And what is really interesting is they're not universal. They are absolutely arbitrary. If a local town or county has enough hysterics screaming loudly enough, then they institute closure orders. Now, again, I ask, where in the Constitution are any of these closure orders authorized and allowed? And where do they overturn the Fifth Amendment, or in state constitutions, the relevant quotations? In Oklahoma, we have the same passage right here in Oklahoma. So, and it's in Article 2. So the question is, where, I mean, you've got conflicting parts if there was something in the Constitution, and there's not. But if there was something in the Constitution which should rule out, should always be liberty. And the individual rights, because that was what government was created for. Read the Declaration of Independence. That's what it says about self-evident truth and inalienable rights, that governments were instituted among men to secure those rights. It is not about protecting life at all costs, and we don't care what we do to you to protect lives. We don't care how many lives it costs to protect the lives of everyone else, because that's kind of the attitude they have. So, from the COVID chase car, this is David Oldham signing off for now.